Yo, what's going on YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and we are taking a look today at a recap of the 2021 NHL Trade Deadline. We'll be taking a look at that in this video. If you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey and want to see the latest news around the NHL, you guys know what to do. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. And let's take a look at a recap of the 2021 NHL Trade Deadline. So, we're starting things off back a couple days ago after the Islanders trade with the New Jersey Devils. We already talked about that, but there's been a couple of little trades that I didn't think deserved their own video, but I think they should be put together in this long video of a recap of the trade deadline. So, we're going back to April 8th, a trade between the Blackhawks and the Florida Panthers. And the big pieces in this trade really are Brett Connolly and Henrik Borgstrom. And it's kind of a minor trade overall, but we see the Florida Panthers acquire defenseman Lucas Carlsson and forward Lucas Wallmark from the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for Brett Connolly, Riley Stillman, Henrik Borgstrom, and a 2021 7th round pick. I don't know why they throw. I mean, what's the point of that 7th round pick? What is that? Is it really that important to add? But whatever. So, what are the important parts of this trade? Who won this trade? Honestly, I think it's a win for both teams. This is a very good mutual trade. The Florida Panthers rid themselves of the Brett Connolly contract, which he obviously hasn't performed at the level they were hoping he would when they signed him 2 years ago. Kind of that trigger-happy money spree they went on a couple years back with Connolly, Bobrovsky, Strawman. We've seen those guys, Achari. We've seen how that maybe hasn't worked out so well for the Panthers. But they moved that contract out, so no harm, no foul. They do move out Henrik Borgstrom, who has been playing in Finland this year. He had no interest in playing with the Florida Panthers. He's obviously got a tarnished relationship with the management and the coaching staff, and Henrik Borgstrom was not going to play with the Panthers again. So it's fitting that he got moved out because he was never going to play with the Panthers. So it's a win-win for both sides. It's a win for Henrik Borgstrom, right? Because he wasn't going to play with the Panthers anyway, so maybe he comes back to the NHL, maybe at the end of this season or next year. Brett Connolly gets a change of scenery. He hasn't really developed the way the Panthers had hoped he would when they signed him over from the Tampa Bay Lightning. So this is a good move overall for all parties. You know, Chicago gets closer to the cap. They stay further from the cap floor. They pick up some forward depth in Brett Connolly. That, kill two birds with one stone. Henrik Borgstrom could come in and potentially be the third center for this team moving forward to add some depth to the Blackhawks lineup. They add Riley Stillman, another depth defenseman. That's a good pickup. But Florida doesn't lose in this trade either. I think Carlson's a pretty good player. Wallmark obviously spent some time in Carolina. I think he was a part of the Trocheck deal, right? Or something like that. I like that trade for both sides. I think long term it could be a win for the Panthers because they moved that Connolly contract. But Henrik Borgstrom could come back and bite the Panthers in the butt. But we'll see how that works out. Wow, so we just got a big development. So good thing I waited to make this video because Anthony Mantha got traded, and we'll be looking at that. And that'll be my first reaction to it, so we'll get to that. So, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Blue Jackets were making a couple of deals, and this was the first one we saw between Kekalainen and Dubas ahead of the deadline. Toronto acquires forward Riley Nash for a 7th round pick from Toronto in 2022. This is a great trade for the Toronto Maple Leafs, a depth guy for a 7th round pick. He could jump into your bottom 6 and be a really nice productive player. And I think Riley Nash adds that little bit of depth that I think Dubas has been looking for. In the event that they have an injury, especially down the middle, you can see a guy like Riley Nash jump in as a center and help fill out that center core. I think that's a great trade for the Leafs. And the Blue Jackets pick up a draft pick for a guy that wasn't going to re-sign. So I guess they don't really lose either. So now we see a trade between the Avalanche and the Detroit Red Wings, which the Red Wings now are seemingly very active. Steve Yzerman at the deadline, and we'll get into that. So Colorado acquires Patrick Nemeth from Detroit for a 4th-round pick in 2022. Colorado, we knew they wanted to add some depth to their lineup. They had the cap space, and they absolutely utilized it this year at the deadline. Patrick Nemeth is a nice piece to this team. He's going to help them out, add a little bit of depth to the blue line. For a 4th-round pick, Detroit picks up yet another draft pick. A good move by Stevie Y, and it's a good trade for Colorado, picking up some depth on the blue line. And this is just a trade where maybe, I'll get into it later. Because Colorado moved out another defenseman, this allows Nemeth to come in and kind of fill in that void. So Florida making another trade with a big seller at the deadline, Buffalo. So Buffalo acquires a 2021 3rd-round pick from the Florida Panthers in exchange for right-shot defenseman Brandon Montour. This is a big move for the Florida Panthers. This is the guy that replaces Aaron Ekblad. Now, I'm not saying he is Aaron Ekblad. We all know that, but for the meantime, for the rest of this regular season into the postseason, the Florida Panthers are expecting Montour to be at least a 1st or 2nd pairing right-shot defenseman. And they paid a very cheap price, honestly. They didn't have to give up a 1st or a 2nd for Brandon Montour, a 3rd-round pick. Not too bad. Buffalo wins in this trade too, because Montour, we know, was not coming back to Buffalo. And they gave up a lot of assets for him a couple years back with that trade with the Ducks. I believe they gave up a 1st and a 2nd for Brandon Montour. So that trade kind of coming back, not looking so good for the Sabres. Not the best asset management. But that's kind of the situation they're at. Kind of a situation where Kevin Adams has to just accept what he can get for Brandon Montour at this point. And that's exactly what we saw happen. Now, Brandon Montour has a chance to win a Stanley Cup with a legitimate team in Florida. All right, so now we take a look at the Avalanche making yet another trade. So the Avalanche acquire a little bit more depth, and this time, in between the pipes, they pick up goalie Devan Dubnyk from the San Jose Sharks in exchange for defenseman Greg Pateryn and a 5th-round pick in this year's draft. So another good trade here for the Avalanche. They pick up a good goaltender in Dubnyk. I was kind of surprised. I thought they were looking more maybe at the Coyotes, Kemper or Mantha, or maybe even David Rittich in Calgary. But they decided to go with Devan Dubnyk, and I think he's been all right. Obviously in San Jose, nobody's really been talking about the Sharks, but he's actually put up some decent numbers in San Jose despite the Sharks' record. This is a nice addition for the Avalanche, and I think this is a guy that they could utilize. And like I mentioned, because the Avalanche acquired Patrick Nemeth earlier this week, they were able to trade Greg Pateryn, who really hasn't worked out since that trade with the Minnesota Wild, so it made sense that they would move him again. And the San Jose Sharks pick up a draft pick and a depth defenseman at the deadline. So now we see Detroit and Columbus at it again, making a trade between each other, and this was actually a 3-team trade for David Savard. So the Detroit Red Wings acquire a... Alright, so Detroit acquires a 2021 4th-round pick for, going to Tampa, David Savard and Brian Lashoff. So Tampa Bay gets Brian Lashoff and David Savard. Columbus acquires a 1st-round pick from Tampa in this year's draft and a 2022 3rd-round pick. I think this is a good trade for everybody involved. Columbus picks up one of their 3 first-rounders that they will have here at the 2021 NHL Draft and a 3rd-round pick for David Savard, a pending unrestricted free agent. Not a bad grab there. For Columbus, Detroit actually keeps themselves from the cap floor, and this matters here now with this Mantha trade. They actually moved up. I think they retained 25% of the deal. I don't know why else they would have been involved in this. But if they did retain salary, let me know down below. Did Detroit retain salary on Savard? Because Savard actually went to Detroit first from Columbus, and then Detroit flipped him to Tampa. So Stevie Y still supporting his Tampa Bay Lightning, right? Kind of helping them out. And then Detroit acquires a 4th-round pick. So I think overall everybody wins in this trade. Detroit gets closer, keeps themselves away from the cap floor. Tampa Bay acquires David Savard and Brian Lashoff, 2 good defensive players. We know Tampa Bay likes to add their defensemen at the deadline. They did that again this year. And Columbus, like I said, picks up another 1st and 3rd-round pick in the upcoming year's draft. So a good trade for everybody involved. So now this is a little bit of a minor trade, but actually I think a good trade for Washington. Washington acquires defenseman. Washington trades defenseman Jonas Siegenthaler to the New Jersey Devils for a conditional third-round pick in this year's draft. I think that's a little bit interesting. Siegenthaler was some nice depth for the Capitals. Why would they want to move that out? Maybe we would find out later on. They would maybe make a big trade, and that's what we saw. So Jonas Siegenthaler goes to New Jersey. Obviously, the Devils have seen a lot of Siegenthaler because he's been playing in the North Division in the American Hockey League the past couple years with the Hershey Bears, the affiliate of the Capitals. But the Capitals and the Devils, their farm teams do play an awful lot in that North Division, especially this year. Siegenthaler has been in the NHL for the most part this year, but he's been a decent defenseman, a good 5'6" defenseman, but he has the potential to be that top, that top two pairing, maybe top four pairing more likely, a top four pairing defenseman, a good two-way guy, a good 4 or 5 defenseman in the future. And it costs it a third-round pick, which I'm kind of surprised the Devils gave up a draft pick for a depth defenseman, but they really think that they could get something from Siegenthaler, and maybe that's why they made that deal. So kind of an interesting trade, especially with Washington kind of selling a player away, but I think there's more to it. Like I said, salary. They wanted to move some salary, so they picked up a third-round pick, and they moved out salary. That's a win-win for Washington. So now we see a trade here with the Montreal Canadiens. So much for Bergevin saying they were done making trades. That was a lie. John Merrill going to the Montreal Canadiens from the Detroit Red Wings. Stevie Y making yet another deal. He acquires Hayden Verbeek and a 5th-round pick in this year's draft from Montreal for John Merrill. Montreal had literally a dozen draft picks in this year's 2021 draft. So again, they move another draft pick, and they trade a depth player for John Merrill, a good 5'6" defenseman to add to the Habs lineup. And the Habs think they can win the Cup this year. They're going to make the playoffs more than likely, unless Edmonton somehow sneaks in there. Montreal has a playoff spot, and I think they really think they could go on a run this year with Carey Price, Shea Weber. They feel that they can win this year, and the young guys starting to come up. This is a great opportunity for Montreal to maybe go win a Stanley Cup. I keep getting these alerts about this Mantha trade. All right, so let's move on. So the Toronto Maple Leafs make a 3-way trade, and Columbus, again, making a 3-way trade here. So we see Nick Foligno and Stefan Noesen go to the Toronto Maple Leafs. San Jose acquires a 2021 4th-round pick, and they retain 25% of Nick Foligno's contract. Columbus acquires another 1st-round pick here from Toronto and a 4th-round pick in next year's draft from the Maple Leafs. A great trade overall, honestly, for all teams involved. Toronto picks up more depth. I mean, look who they've added now. They've added Riley Nash. They've added Stefan Noesen. They've added Nick Foligno. And it really hasn't costed them all that much. What does it cost? A 1st, a 4th, and a 7th for those 3 guys? That's actually not that bad for Kyle Dubas and the Leafs. San Jose acquires the 4th-round pick, retaining 25% of the salary. It's a win-win for everybody involved. And I have to say, honestly, these 3-way trades are really becoming a trend in the NHL. We saw 2 of them here at this year's deadline. So just something to keep an eye on. And now we start to see the Boston Bruins make some noise, as now they have teams nipping at their heels there for that final spot in the North Division with the East Division with the New York Rangers and the Philadelphia Flyers, only 4 points back of the Bees for that final playoff spot. The Boston Bruins add some depth on the defense, and they headed up to Ottawa to take a look at Mike Riley, who they got for a 3rd-round pick here in 2022. Give me a second. All right, so they picked up a 3rd-round pick for Mike Riley. This is a great trade for Ottawa. Honestly, this is a great trade for the Senators. This is a guy, Mike Riley, he's a good defenseman. He's a good 4 or 5 defenseman. And on the Bruins, he's going to be a 3rd-pairing guy. He's a good defenseman, left-shot defenseman, which obviously we know Boston has been lacking a little bit. No, it's not Matthias Janmark. No, it's not David Savard. But it's still a good defenseman. And I think this is a nice upgrade for a rental that you're going to give up a lot of assets for. This may be in Boston's best interest in the future that they only gave up a 3rd-round pick for that role instead of going big game hunting like maybe the Maple Leafs did, or maybe a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning did. That may have been in the best interest for the Bruins at the deadline. Speaking of the Maple Leafs, we see them make another trade, and this time it's not for forwards. They pick up a goaltender. We see the Toronto Maple Leafs acquire David Rittich from the Calgary Flames for a 3rd-round pick in next year's draft. So Toronto's giving up all their draft picks. Kyle Dubas is going all in for the Cup this year. He knows he doesn't have to play Boston. He doesn't have to play Tampa in the first round or the first 2 rounds. So they are going all in, and we are seeing Kyle Dubas do exactly that at this deadline, and he is going all in. And we see them pick up that guy behind, Jack Campbell, who has been very good, 11-0. Once the deadline comes, and if they didn't make a move here, and Jack Campbell starts to fall off, or God forbid he gets injured, Kyle Dubas would be kicking himself in the foot for not making this trade. It's a good move, only a 3rd-round pick, not that much, but honestly, Calgary getting a 3rd for David Rittich is good. David Rittich was a number 3, maybe a number 4 for most teams, 2 or 3 years ago, and they've turned him into a 3rd-round pick, which I think is pretty solid as a rental. So give credit to Calgary. Good asset management for a guy that probably wasn't going to re-sign this offseason. And they have goaltenders in the system. Dustin Wolf, Tyler Parsons. Those guys will come up and get a chance next year. So they don't need David Rittich for the long-term future. We see the Islanders make another move. Now, there was some rumbles the Islanders were looking at defensive upgrades, and they did that at the deadline. This would be the only move the Islanders would make ahead of the deadline besides the big Kyle Palmieri and Zajac trade. The Islanders would also acquire defenseman Braden Coburn from the Ottawa Senators for a 7th-round pick. Very nice deal for the Islanders. Braden Coburn is going to add some veteran leadership. He won the Cup last year with Tampa. He is a veteran at its finest. Great defensive defenseman, would fit in very nicely with the Islanders system. This is a great move for the Islanders. And Lou Lamoriello only getting him for a 7th-round pick. I think that's a big thumbs up from me for the New York Islanders. So now we see a pretty big blockbuster trade. These are all trades from last night. The deadline, it was almost like the deadline was 12 o'clock this morning, yesterday morning, because all these trades were happening last night. So we see the Boston Bruins make the big fish free agent, the big fish guy off the board. They take Taylor Hall from the Buffalo Sabres and Curtis Lazar for a 2nd-round pick and Anders Bjork. Now, I think there's a condition on that draft pick because it doesn't say whether it's a 2021 or a 2022 or maybe a 2026. Who knows, right? That 2nd-round pick, we don't know where it's going. Now, it's kind of interesting, right? Because everybody going up into the deadline, including myself, the price tag was a 1st-round pick, a prospect, and a depth guy for Hall. And that doesn't look like that package was given to the Buffalo Sabres. They only got a 2nd and Anders Bjork. Now, honestly, Boston made a good trade here. They want to win the Cup. And they added the defenseman earlier in the day, and now they pick up Taylor Hall and Curtis Lazar, add some forward depth. They're looking at some of the teams around the league, maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs, they have to play them in the final or the conference finals. They may be saying, oh shit, maybe we got to be a little bit concerned about them. And that's what we're seeing here. A great move, and I think this is a great trade for the Boston Bruins. Seeing teams around the league, maybe Toronto, seeing them pick up a big top 6 forward in Foligno, and Boston's like, yeah, you know what? We're going to do the same thing. We're going to take Taylor Hall from the Buffalo Sabres. So, interesting trade there. Now we see the Pittsburgh Penguins. The new management, Brian Burke and Ron Hextall, getting involved as we see them make a big trade for Jeff Carter from the LA Kings. So Jeff Carter goes to Pittsburgh for a conditional 2nd and a conditional 3rd-round pick and a conditional 4th-round pick. A weird trade. There's got to be conditions. I assume whether he resigns, whether whether the team goes to the final this year or they make the playoffs. I don't know. But Pittsburgh here, despite where they are in the standings, they could still win that East division in terms of making the playoffs and winning that division. So Pittsburgh went all in and they decided to pick up a guy that nobody was talking about. Everybody was talking about Dustin Brown, maybe Alex Iafallo in LA, maybe even Jonathan Quick. But Jeff Carter kind of came out of nowhere, but a great pickup. And we know Ron Hextall has that history with the LA Kings. He was a part of the management team a couple years back before he became the general manager in Philly. So this is a great move, and it kind of makes sense, brings that connection back. I think Jeff Carter would really fit well in Pittsburgh, and he goes back to the Keystone State. Before he moved to the LA Kings, he was a Philadelphia Flyer, so now he goes back to Pennsylvania, and that will be quite interesting, I'm sure. Now we see the Chicago Blackhawks make a move with Vancouver. Vancouver we thought would be pretty quiet, especially with their whole bug situation and the fact they haven't played in almost a month. But we see them make a little trade here, and they trade a guy that may have been the catalyst for the Canucks situation. Adam Gaudette, who first tested positive, he goes to Chicago in exchange for Matthew Highmore. Both these guys seems like a legit trade for both these guys. Matthew Highmore, change of scenery. Obviously, we've seen guys kind of come into the system there in Chicago. Pia Suter. Now you're seeing guys like Borgstrom come in. And Brett Connolly, they don't necessarily need Matthew Highmore, and it gives him an opportunity to go to Vancouver, where actually Vancouver wanted to re-sign him, coming out as an unrestricted free agent back when he was out of college. Vancouver was very high on Matthew Highmore, and now they get to bring that power forward-esque guy into the lineup, which makes you wonder, is that the end for Jake Virtanen? And if he doesn't get traded here at this deadline, I would not be surprised at all if we saw him get traded this summer, because Matthew Highmore can kind of fill in that winger grinder role that we see from Jake Virtanen. And not to mention, he's much cheaper than Virtanen as well. And for Chicago, they pick up a nice center in Adam Gaudette. I think he's going to be a good third line center. He reminds me a lot of Casey Cizikas of the Islanders. I think that's the kind of guy you could get in Adam Gaudette. And I think this is a guy that Chicago, long term, again, it seems like there's a couple guys vying for that third line spot. Pia Suter. Now you got Henrik Borgstrom. And now you have Adam Gaudette. Stan Bowman, let's be honest, considering they're rebuilding, he's added a couple nice forwards, specifically centers, to the Hawks lineup moving into the future. All right, so now we see the Devils get on the move again. So now that they acquired Jonas Siegenthaler, they move out a defenseman. So Dmitry Kulikov goes to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for a 4th-round pick. I think this is a good trade for Edmonton, a depth defenseman who could play maybe 5-6 on your blue line. And he, for a 4th-round pick that's conditional, that doesn't seem all that bad. So I have to assume the condition on that is if Edmonton makes the postseason. But we'll see what happens with that. But I think that's interesting that it's only a 4th-round pick, not too costly there for the Oilers. All right, so Tampa Bay making another move. They acquire defenseman Frederick Claesson from the San Jose Sharks from Magnus Krona. Not a big move here, obviously. I didn't even know the guy's name. But San Jose picks up a goaltender. I think Tampa has some good goalie depth. And they pick up another defenseman, Tampa. So a nice trade there. So now we see another weird 3-team trade with San Jose, as the Vegas Golden Knights, the Blackhawks, and the Sharks make a trade. So Vegas acquires Mattias Janmark and a 5th-round pick. Chicago acquires a 2nd and a 3rd-round pick. And San Jose acquires a 5th-round pick for retaining the salary on Janmark. So San Jose, again, retaining salary on some of these deals. They're getting 4ths, 5ths. Not bad for San Jose, just for keeping some salary. And Vegas adds another forward. Mattias Janmark comes in. Now, there were rumors. They were looking at Nolan Patrick of Philadelphia. But once they acquired Janmark, he was going into this morning. He was the top guy on the trade bait board. And Mattias Janmark did, in fact, move. And Chicago picked up a 2nd and a 3rd. Not too bad for them. A pretty high price tag, honestly. And Vegas obviously going all in. We know what the Vegas Golden Knights are doing. They want to win a Stanley Cup. And they made that move to do that. Colorado makes another move. They bring back forward Carl Soderberg, going to solidify some center depth there for the Avalanche in exchange for Ryder Rolston and Josh Dickinson. Don't really know who those guys are. I assume Josh Dickinson is related to Jason Dickinson, but I don't know. But an interesting trade there. I think it's a good trade for both sides, but it seems like Colorado gets Carl Soderberg back. That's short term, that's the best part of the trade. And let's be honest, that seems to be the best guy in that deal overall. Florida making another move, looking at the Calgary Flames, as the Calgary Flames finally move out Sam Bennett. The Florida Panthers acquire Sam Bennett and a 6th-round pick in next year's draft for Emil Heineman and a 2022 2nd-round pick. Now, that Heineman kid, I believe, is a 1st or 2nd-round pick of the Florida Panthers. So that's no slouch. That's a good price tag and a 2nd-round pick. I think this is a great trade for the Calgary Flames. A guy in Sam Bennett, he didn't play that well there, former 1st-round pick. He was destined to get moved, and we saw a pretty nice deal get done. Sam Bennett, honestly, I thought he was going to be moved this summer by Calgary, maybe with a Johnny Gaudreau or something like that. but I think this is a good small trade, and the Florida Panthers add some forward depth on their cup run this year. So now we see the Montreal Canadiens. Again, Bergevin, maybe just stop telling the media, or the media has to stop listening to Bergevin. I think that's the problem. Because Bergevin makes another move, adding another defenseman. He acquires Erik Gustafsson from Philly for a 7th-round pick next year. Again, another depth move. Gustafsson just adds some depth to the blue line. Now, I'm surprised Philly makes this move. They're only 4 points out of a playoff spot, and they're starting to move out guys. Kind of interesting to see how the Flyers are looking at their team right now. We see the Toronto Maple Leafs acquire defenseman Ben Hutton for a 5th-round pick, a former 1st-round pick of Vancouver. Ben Hutton comes over to Anaheim during training camp this year. He signs a 1-year deal. Things didn't work out for Hutton in Anaheim, and the Ducks have now gone in a different direction, adding some other defensemen. So Ben Hutton just doesn't seem to fit the fold, and honestly, it's a good trade overall for both sides. Depth defenseman for Toronto, and Anaheim picks up a 5th-round pick for a guy that honestly didn't look like was going to get signed. He was likely going to Europe, and Anaheim gave him a shot, and now Ben Hutton has a chance to win a cup with Toronto. So kind of interesting how the tables have turned for Ben Hutton. Erik Gustafsson goes to Nashville from the Ottawa Senators for a 7th-round pick. Guys, Nashville is a buyer. What the hell? So much for Nashville selling off Ekholm and Forsberg and Arvidsson a couple weeks ago, to now buying at the deadline, because now they are in a playoff spot now. And now with teams like Chicago and Columbus selling, it all seems like Nashville will make it this year. And guys, I'm saying it now, Nashville just might win the Stanley Cup this year. Based off the turnaround they've had, I would not put it past Nashville for how good they have been. And all these teams like the Islanders and the Leafs and the Lightning trading 1st and 2nd-round picks, it's going to be Nashville, who only gave up a 7th for Erik Gustafsson. Or Goodbranson. They're going to be the ones that end up winning the cup, right? Well, I'm calling it now. Nashville wins the cup in 2021. Remember that. Pin that. San Jose makes another trade. So San Jose acquires Alex Barabanov from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto acquires Antti Suomela. Suomela hasn't worked out that much in San Jose. Just, again, another former 1st or 2nd-round pick in Suomela. Really haven't heard much about Barabanov. I know he's good in GM mode for the NHL games, but I don't think that's going to be the 90 overall player that we're going to see go to San Jose here. He's a good depth piece, but more of an AHL move, honestly. But Suomela does have some potential as well. So now we get into a bigger trade here for Anaheim. Anaheim acquires Hayden Flurry, a former 1st-round pick of the Carolina Hurricanes. The Carolina Hurricanes acquire Yanni Hakanpää and a 6th-round pick. Now, Yanni Hakanpää, I've seen him play with the Ducks. He definitely had some issues with the Ducks, but he was a good defenseman as a younger guy. He's one of those guys that he really flourished in the NHL when given the opportunity. And now going to Carolina, he has a chance to win a cup. I think there's a great opportunity for him. I think it's a great trade for Anaheim. They picked up the best player in the deal. And I like Yanni Hakanpää, but I think Hayden Flurry is a much improved upgrade. Kind of the poor man's Cam Fowler in Anaheim. And now Anaheim has both Cam Fowler and Hayden Flurry. He's going to help the Ducks move the puck forward, and he could add some goal scoring on the blue line. And I think that's what Bob Murray was looking for here in Hayden Flurry. So now we see a divisional trade, the Washington Capitals and the Flyers. So the Washington Capitals acquire Michael Raffl for a 5th-round pick. Not a high price tag. I think that's a good trade for the Washington Capitals. And the Flyers pick up a draft pick for a depth guy. Winnipeg acquires Jordy Ben for a 6th-round pick. Not the defenseman I thought Winnipeg would be going for, but that ends up being the guy they get. Wow, that was a big trade by Washington. But we'll get into that. We're almost there. So Jordy Ben adds some depth. I think that's a little disappointing for Winnipeg. I thought Kevin Cheveldayoff would maybe make a big move. Maybe bringing in Josh Manson or Brandon Montour or even Erasmus Ristolainen in Buffalo. We didn't see them do any of that. They decided to lay low. They like the team they have. They have some cap stuff too. They're pretty high up against the cap. So they bring in Jordy Ben. It's just a nice depth move, and I think that's a good move for Vancouver in acquiring another asset to their group. So now Vancouver, all of a sudden, making a couple moves. They make another move here with the Blackhawks. Vancouver acquires Madison Bowey and a 5th-round pick for a 4th-round pick going to Chicago. So obviously they're not valuing Madison Bowey too much, but I think Madison Bowey had some potential in Washington with the Hershey Bears. Things didn't work out for him. He got moved around a lot, and maybe he'll get that opportunity in Vancouver. That Vancouver blue line is looking good, though, so he's going to have a lot of competition there in Vancouver, but I think it could have the potential to be a great trade for him. We'll see how things work out, but this could be a good move overall for Vancouver, and Washington and Chicago just moves up their draft pick. So this is the biggest trade of the day, guys. And the fireworks come after 3 o'clock. And we are now a half hour into this video, so if you've stuck around this long, I appreciate that very much. The Washington Capitals acquire from the Detroit Red Wings power forward, Anthony Mantha. The Washington Capitals acquire Anthony Mantha. The Detroit Red Wings acquire a 2021 first-round pick, a 2022 second-round pick, Richard Panik, and Jacob Vrana. Wow. So we see a blockbuster deal by Steve Yzerman at 3 o'clock, or past 3 o'clock. Guys, this is a big trade. So Anthony Mantha, we've been talking about it really for like a year and a half, that Detroit has been really listening to offers on Anthony Mantha. And Washington was not the team I was thinking. I was thinking maybe the Islanders, the Anaheim Ducks, the Arizona Coyotes, the Dallas Stars, maybe Pittsburgh, maybe Boston. Nope. He goes to the Washington Capitals for a high price tag. So, guys, just to break this down. So, Washington acquires a power forward, a guy that's actually struggled in Detroit this year. He actually hasn't put up the best numbers. He definitely turned it on in the second half of the season when he was like, oh shit, maybe I could get traded somewhere and win. I think he started to play a little bit better, but he's had a slump in Detroit this year. And I don't know how Steve Yzerman got this much for him, but he got a lot for Anthony Mantha. A first from Washington this year, a second-round pick next year, Richard Panik, which is nice depth. He just fills in that role for Mantha the rest of the year. Probably salary involved too. And Jacob Vrana. Now, Vrana is kind of a big thing in this deal as well, because that's a player on the Capitals roster now gone. Now, I think there's more to this story. Vrana played well with the Hershey Bears. I remember seeing him in Hershey, and I was like, he's going to be a top 6 forward in the NHL. He's going to be a sniper. And I think Steve Yzerman saw that potential too. This is a former first-round pick in Vrana. This is a great trade. They basically acquired a young version, potentially, of Anthony Mantha, a good scoring player, right? Jacob Vrana, former first-round pick, a first-round pick, a second, and a depth piece. That is a big haul. But this sends a message to the Washington Capitals group. What the hell? This is sending a message to Ovechkin, Backstrom, and that group. Hey guys, listen. We are winning a Stanley Cup this year. We just added a big power forward that's going to be in front of the net. And this is your guy, Anthony Mantha. And this is their guy. He is that Patrick Hornquist-esque player. I always like to use him as a comparable, or even an Anders Lee. He reminds me a lot of Anders Lee. He's that kind of guy, and I think this is a great addition for Washington. He can fight, he can score, he gets scrappy in front of the net, causing screens in front. This could be the guy for Washington. If they win the Cup here in 2021, this puts Washington over the edge. And it came at a premium price here, but this may be worth it for the Capitals. And I'm telling you now, this may be the difference for the Capitals. I was talking about Nashville earlier, but this move by Washington, this is a massive trade here at 3 o'clock, and kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't hear anything about Washington even looking at Anthony Mantha. And just like that, Anthony Mantha is now a member of the Washington Capitals. So guys, that is it for this video. If you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL, you guys know what to do. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. Guys, let me know. I'm going to make a video tomorrow on the winners, the losers, and the teams that just watched at this year's trade deadline. But let me know who were your winners, losers at this year's deadline. Let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys like what we're doing, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Fuck.